Okay, welcome everyone. This is Katerina from MindCraft. Welcome to our episode 2 of my new podcast, MindCraft Peace. And it is my great pleasure to welcome Andrea Trank, who is connecting with me all the way from Florida, USA. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you so much for Katerina for inviting me.
The pleasure is mine. So just to give people a little bit of a background, Andrea and I connected via LinkedIn a couple of months ago. I returned to LinkedIn as a platform, a few months back. It felt like it's a space to be in and again. And what a lovely surprise it was to connect with people like Andrea, who, were on a very similar wavelength. And it was just wonderful to read her posts and her comments. So I thought she'd be an amazing guest, for a conversation on my podcast. So I'm grateful Andrea made the time, and we'll spend probably about 60 minutes max talking about Andrea, her work, and where our work interlinks. And I'll introduce Andrea briefly. There's a lot she's got under her belt in the life she's lived so far. So Andrea is an integrative medicine health coach, a yoga teacher, specializes in somatic and restorative yoga. She's a heart trainer and trauma sensitive practitioner. And she supports young people, children, and college students training to become teachers. And she uses the heart math practices, polyvagal theory, and yoga to support her clients. She also creates beautiful jewelry. And she is an doTERRA advocate, wellness advocate, just like me, so loves essential oils. And I love the phrase you use for yourself that and your work, which is that you help people age vibrantly, and that you help people manage stress, anxiety, gut health, and chronic conditions, because in fact you were on quite a journey helping yourself get well, get healthy, and you've dealt with some serious chronic illnesses, and you are here now, very vibrant, aging very vibrantly. Is there anything you would like to add to the?
No, I think you've summarized my background quite well. I am a mother of 3 sons, and I have one granddaughter, and she lives in Brazil. My one son married a Brazilian woman, and I have been with my husband since I was 20 years old, and I'm now 64. So I have been very supported in my personal life by a man who has allowed me to do all, because my support from him, I'm allowed to give so much to the world. And so I have to give him credit for always supporting my mission in the world, because it's been challenging, and my health challenges have also been challenging to him, and he's been always willing to do what we need to do so that I can be my healthiest. So.
Oh, that's beautiful, and it really resonates because I've been with my husband since I was 20 years old. A little younger than you, but in terms of the support, I feel exactly the same. Very, very grateful, very appreciative, because I wouldn't be able to do what I am doing now if it weren't for his support. And we went through our challenges in marriage, and also my it was my mental health rather than physical health, but often goes hand in hand. So yeah, that's
Absolutely.
wonderful. That's beautiful. I did miss out one important thing, which is your work as a teacher yourself at schools. So perhaps we can rewind a little bit to when you were a college professor, teacher at schools. How did your work with children began? Where did it
Okay, that's
begin?
a great question. So, I did not graduate college to become a school teacher. I
Mm,
graduated college and wanted to be a journalist, and I was a journalist. So, for the first 10 years of my career life, I was covering news, but I was mostly covering bad news. I mean, that's what a news reporter is supposed to do. So, I was covering everything wrong with the world. But being an empathic, sensitive person myself, it was starting to affect my health. So
mm,
when I covered a plane crash, I got afraid to fly. When I covered environmental pollution issues, I became, really worried about the environment. When I covered somebody, going through a surgery for brain cancer, I became worried that I had brain cancer. So
mm,
I was getting post-traumatic stress syndrome from being a news reporter. And I realized that I went to some counseling, and it all kind of came to a head when we experienced an earthquake in Los Angeles. My husband and I were both news reporters, and we were sent out to cover the earthquake and all the damage. So
mm,
normally when people go through a crisis like that, they get to be with their family and they get to regroup and they get
mm,
to comfort each other. Well, he and I were both being sent on separate ways to go cover everybody's tragedies. And so we didn't have the chance to process ourselves what had gone on. And I really fell apart after that. And this was the first time I had to ask him to support me. I wanted to move out of Los Angeles. I didn't want to live in earthquake country. But
mm,
ironically, that's what led me to go study and become an earth science teacher. Because anytime I became afraid of something, I felt like if I empowered myself with knowledge and just faced it head on and really understood it, then I could deal with it better. So believe it or not, my first job as a school teacher was teaching earth science. And earth
mm,
science is a lot about earthquakes and rocks and minerals and weather issues. Because I was deathly afraid of tornadoes too.
mm,
So I had a successful career as a school teacher in a public high school in Charlottesville, Virginia for 10 years, and even won a Golden Apple. And I just loved teaching the kids. I loved teaching them about the environment. I took them outdoors. We were doing all sorts of projects. It was very project based. It was very much about me helping them become aware citizens of what we were doing to our environment. In
mm,
fact, I was teaching climate change 30 years ago, before it was called climate change. Back then it was called global warming. And I was teaching that as part of my curriculum because I knew what we were doing back then. I often call myself a canary in the coal mine. I sensed what was going on so early. And I think that's part of the reason I became even more sick, is because I felt so affected by world events that I couldn't control. In the classroom, I could. In the classroom, I could elevate these children, hopefully to become better citizens. But
mm,
I took on a lot of the world's problems, and then I took on their emotional baggage. And so while I understood the value of teaching from the heart and being open hearted, I didn't understand the value of keeping my own heart regulated and my nervous system
mm,
and staying emotionally regulated so that not everything that was happening with them had to become part of what was happening inside my body.
mm,
And that's why I love, so much of what I do these days, because those were the tools that taught me to heal that I can now reintroduce
mm,
back into the classroom through the work I'm doing.
mm. So would you expand on your current work with young people and children? That would be lovely. Yeah.
Yes. So I left the field of teaching burned out. So after I taught at the high school level, I went to the college level and I taught there for 8 years as an adjunct. And there I was training teachers. So I was in a college of
Mm,
education training teachers to become science teachers. And I loved, again, working with the young people, but my health took a real downturn. I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease. And at the same time, my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so I was grappling with my own health issues, my mother's rapid decline, still have three children. And I realized that I had no more to give. I felt like I was done being a teacher and done with the career that I loved and valued so much. And so I went on this journey to heal. And the journey to heal is, again, the way I do things is I become empowered with knowledge and then start practicing on myself. And then from there, I go and take it out to the world. So the first thing I did was become certified as a yoga teacher because I'd always practiced yoga and felt like yoga was a really good step in the direction for working with my nervous system issues and anxiety and some of my gut issues and things like that. So, but then I realized I needed more. So then I went back and became an integrative medicine health coach because I wanted to learn about supplements and nutrition and all the hormonal changes. So I added that in to learn about myself and then added that into what I was using with working with my clients. And then I still realized something was missing and I wasn't really sure what was missing. And this kind of came about really serendipitously. I was taking a training in chakras and through a yoga teacher who has since passed, I'm sorry to say. And she was also a person who was very good at reading energy. So she just asked us, does anybody want me to read their energy? And I kind of raised my hand because I was always that type of person. Sure, read my energy. And so we're here like this, talking on a Zoom call in the class, and she like looks at me and she steps back like suddenly, and she goes, "I'm reading heart." And I go, "Well, what do you mean you're reading heart? Like you should be working with the heart association, the heart something." I'm not exactly sure. And I kept thinking my path was to go into yoga for brain health since my mom died of Alzheimer's. And so I'm like thinking about it. She didn't have anything more to say. So we went through our class. The next day, I'm sitting here looking at my computer on Facebook, and out of the blue scrolls Heart Math certification, 50% off. And I'm going, okay, this can't be a coincidence. I had never heard of Heart Math. I had no idea what it was, but it was only going to cost me like $195 to become certified. So I said, why not? So I signed up that day for Heart Math, and I never looked back since. Because Heart Math was the missing piece for me in my healing journey, which was understanding my nervous system and emotional regulation and understanding this term called physiological coherence, which means you regulate your heart rhythms in a certain way that it then communicates to your brain. And when you get your heart rhythms looking like a sine wave, like this, most of our heart rhythms look like this. And that's because we go from being calm to being like hyper to like being scared of something to then eating. So all day long, our heart rhythms are going like this all day as it speeds up, slows down, but it's not doing it smoothly. And for some of us who have a dysregulated nervous system, it's very chaotic looking if you look at the chart. And so I had to learn through the Heart Math tools, which is primarily breathing practices and emotional regulation tools with a biofeedback device. And you don't have to use a biofeedback device. I learned how to recognize when my heart, emotions, and brain were not coordinating with each other. And when they're not coordinating with each other, most of your other systems are also like doing their own thing. And when you can get them all synchronized in a coordinated fashion, your body becomes more efficient, your nervous system starts in training and becoming more regulated, and the other systems all come online, and you're just like a better operating human. And then there's all sorts of other things. But I realized this was the missing piece, that I was giving, 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 but I had no idea that my nervous system was getting dysregulated by the energy of everything around me.
Mm.
And so when I learned how to regulate my nervous system and my heart rate through breath and emotional practices, and I could even look at it and see on this little biofeedback device, then I could re-regulate myself first and then be more present, be more rational, be more reasonable, be more compassionate, kind to others without feeling depleted. And that whole thing is it builds your own resilience and your own energy so that you are able to keep giving to the world without draining yourself.
Yeah, the Heart Math Institute, from what I know, are doing an amazing job. I think they've been going for over 20 years now, maybe
30
longer.
years.
30
30
years,
years.
yeah. And for people who kind of are reassured by science, they are an amazing institution to go to, because they are doing scientific experiments and prove things and come up with new they come up with revelations, to be honest, because what I've learned, for example, is that the heart has its own neurons. Like we
40,000
associate,
40,000 of them. It's got
yes,
40,000 neurons.
we associate neurons only with the brain, but actually the main brain of our body, it lies within our heart. So if you just get your head around that, then if you listen to your heart and regulate it, and find the coherence, then we'll
Well,
be in a really good place. Yeah.
the heart sends more messages up to the brain through the
Mm,
vagus nerve than the brain sends down to the heart. Now, the brain has far more neurons, like millions of them. We only
mm,
have 40,000. But the other interesting thing about the heart is its magnetic field can be measured
mm,
much further out from the body than the brain's magnetic field. So the magnetic field of the brain, they've only been able to measure to about a quarter inch beyond the brain. The
mm,
heart's magnetic field, at least with the instruments that we have today, can be measured 3 feet in a circumference
mm,
around us.
mm,
And they've done some fascinating experiments on how the heart knows things before the brain or gut does.
mm.
And if you want me to go into that, I can go into that, but we can get into other conversations as well.
Yeah, maybe we can come back to it, because I would like Andrea to share something practical with us as well a bit later on. Wonderful. I'd love to hear more about how more about your story, how the work that you do with young people now, and how you support the teachers in training. Yeah.
Okay. So so I was working at Florida Gulf Coast University for 8 years as an adjunct, and then I left during the time my mother was really sick and I wasn't feeling well. But a professor that I became very close with in the College of Education is a big mental health advocate. So about 2, 3 years ago, I approached her and said, "Look, I've gotten trained in these heart math tools, and I would like to offer this as support for the College of Education pre-service teachers before they get in the classroom." And the reason I really felt strongly about catching them before they're in their classroom is because once a teacher gets in the classroom, their attention gets so focused on the students that they're managing, that to lay one more thing on their plate, and say, "Hey, we need you to do this," even if it's for themselves, they're like,
Mm,
nah, I don't have time. I'm too busy.
mm,
I'm taking care of the kids. I'll manage it. I'll deal with my own stuff during the summer, which is the way I used to deal with it. I used to hold myself together all school year and either just live for the breaks, you know, okay, I can get myself back together during my holiday, or I can get myself back together during summer break. And that's no way to live as a school
Mm,
teacher because over time, the stress is still building in your system. And so maybe you're not going to get sick, when you're a 25-year-old school teacher. But if you're a 40-year-old school teacher and you have lived this way for 15, 20 years, you are going to start seeing the wear and tear on your bodies. And
mm,
and we're seeing that over and over again. Now that's, one issue. And then the other issue is we're seeing a lot of teachers leave the field in the first 3 years of teaching
mm,
because it's just too much for them. And, they're they're thinking it's the behavior of the kids and oh, the kids are too bad these days, I can't stay in the
mm.
classroom. Or if I just could get rid of this one bad apple. I hear that again and again.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, this is all an inside job. If you
Mm,
can figure out what's triggering you, what's upsetting you, how to always emotionally regulate yourself first, you'll
mm,
probably be able to solve most of the behavioral issues in your classroom because the children read your energy. And as I mentioned earlier, your heart's magnetic field is 3 feet. So if your heart, even if you're like putting on this smile on your face and inside you're upset, you're
mm,
sad, you're not, you're feeling for whatever reason down or you're dysregulated, it's being felt by your students. It is. So I had to present a lot of the science to these college students, but I felt like if I could catch them before they got into the classroom full time,
mm,
then I had a better chance of them starting to practice these tools for themselves, and then they could implement the tools in the classroom because HeartMath does provide a whole array of adaptable classroom programs.
mm.
But I didn't want to again say, here's another program for your students' mental and
Yeah.
emotional health. This is for you first and
Mm,
foremost, but
mm,
you're going to want to share it with the young people,
mm,
because you're going to be different. And then when you realize that this is very accessible, it's simple but not easy. And that's what I'd like to describe it.
mm,
These are simple
mm.
tools, but it's not easy because it requires practice. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and it requires a commitment that you are going to do this on a daily basis. So I convinced the professor who knew me. She went to the dean of the ed school and got money. She had been using money for a mental health weekend seminar that she was making all the College of Education students go through. And she literally took that money and said, I'd rather do something that's all semester long with
Mm,
Mrs. Trank, and then let's get the biofeedback devices for the students. So we bought
mm,
a classroom set of the biofeedback devices, and I just finished my fourth semester. Every semester, I spend throughout the semester like 2 hours, 1 hour, 1 hour. So all told, it's about 10 hours during the semester, but it's spread out over the semester. So the first session is 2 hours. A week or two later, I do a coaching session with them. And each time I teach them some new tools and new science, but I'm also there to allow them to bring up whatever issues that are going on in the classroom because at this point they are interns in the classroom. So they're
mm,
not paid, but they're in there with a
mm,
full-time teacher and they're theoretically being trained to take over the class.
mm,
And so I, I start off with, what's awareness, you know, and then from awareness we go into emotions and what are emotions and where do you experience emotions,
mm,
and then we go into thoughts and we go into understanding the nervous system and how the nervous system can be controlling things from behind the scenes
mm,
without recognizing what's going on. And then we start moving more into teacher kind of things like how to handle when the students aren't getting along with each other. So communication problems, how to handle parent-teacher conferences, how to manage difficulties with, excuse me, other staff or your principal. Excuse me, I have to have a drink.
Yeah.
And then just we look at the biofeedback device. We really get to know what that's showing. But then I try to teach them how to recognize if they're dysregulated or if their students are dysregulated. Things like arms in front of you, where your eyes are darting to. So I teach them a lot about reading, body language. I teach them several of the breathing practices. And then I also get into some of the core kind of sciencey, geeky stuff of heart math, which is intuition. I wait till I get through a lot of this stuff because intuition is, you start talking about intuition and people like, go, whoa, what's that about? And that's where I provide the science behind how the heart has an intuitive sense before your brain does, or your gut or your body, and some of the experiments. Or even I get into a little bit about how our heart rhythms can be synced up with the Earth's magnetic field. So I get into some of the more fun stuff and applications in the classroom. There's a lot of research that's been done on using the heart math to help kids have less anxiety around tests. So there's a lot of practical stuff as well. And how to implement it into their own lives and into their daily schedule of the classroom. So that's, a lot of what I do with them.
I love that. And I kind of feel that's to me is the way forward, is to work with the teachers, prep them like you do. You're pioneering before they go into the classrooms. And I think it can be harder as well. I presume they're much younger, so perhaps they haven't had children, so they don't really perhaps understand what it is like to be around little people, or even slightly bigger, and how much of your, if you like, your own stuff comes up if you're, the little people trigger you. I think that's fascinating. And in my own practice with my clients, it always comes back to me. I'm there to hold space. It's my job to be grounded, to make them feel safe, and so that they can really be themselves. And that's my job, isn't it? So
that's a lot.
If I am a little bit,
that's a lot of pressure too. So,
Mm.
and I tell teachers that's like the elephant in the room, because the pressure is on you to hold it together. And yeah, you can hold it together, but if you're really not doing the work on yourself and you're just holding it together for them, you are going to eventually feel the effects of it. And you are going to leave because your heart is going to, not be in it after a while. You brought up something else that triggered another idea and thought for me that I didn't mention, is we do a lot with having them recognize signs of trauma. Signs of trauma, both in themselves and their students. Now, our entire region had one of the worst hurricanes in U.S. history. So all of us in Fort Myers, and I work, with these local teachers, and this was last semester, we were all traumatized by this hurricane. And schools were closed for more than a month. So, here, when the kids got back to school and the teachers got back to school, first of all, a lot of kids were displaced from their homes. They were in different school districts. A lot of the schools were closed and couldn't be reopened. So teachers were being asked to teach out of pods out of some other place. And there were so many signs of trauma. And so last semester, I worked primarily with the educators, the pre-service educators, on how to recognize the signs of trauma within themselves and within their students. And so, that's just a huge issue. In a regular college, prep program to be a teacher, we're not really taught about trauma unless you're going through mental health courses, and you're not, and if you yourself has been through trauma, maybe you've gotten counseling yourself, but, to understand how even your own traumas that you have dealt with can impact the way you are
Mm.
perceiving, what's going on in the classroom. So,
Yeah, talking of trauma, I mean, even if you were not living in Florida at that time, we're all, it's not so long ago, we all went through the pandemic and lockdowns, and that the world seems to be wanting to like move on, like that's done and dust done with, but it isn't. Every one of us been touched by it, and we especially the adolescents, the teenage ones for whom it was really harmful not to be able to see their peers, because that's
right.
so important for them at that age. um that brings me to perhaps how you use
Um,
all of your kind of knowledge
my
with the
dog
young
is
people.
my
Oh,
dog
hello.
is getting himself into trouble, so I have to just look for a second and make sure. He seems to have settled back down. I thought he was going to jump off the sofa, off my bed, and it's a very
Okay.
high bed, and he's a very small dog. So
Mm,
he seems to finally be
be
settling
okay.
down, I think.
Yeah, mention your work with young people. So to be concrete, you support young people at detention centers and also at the YMCA's. How do you support those young people? And you can be more specific with, your practices. And I know you apply the polyvagal theory as well for them. So yeah, if you can tell us more about that.
Sure. So, polyvagal theory in particular focuses on nervous system safety. It's
Mm,
all about being safe and social. And so ultimately, all of us want to feel that our nervous system is primarily, most of the time, in a state of safe and social. Obviously, when there's a real crisis coming up, our nervous system has to shift to the sympathetic, where we have to make decisions quickly to fight,
mm,
to flee. And then there are times when things are so, earth shattering that our nervous system kind of either slows down or goes into a shutdown to protect
mm,
ourselves. And so, but in general, we are only really able to learn when we're in safe and social. Otherwise, survival is what matters to us. And so, when I'm working with young people, particularly those that have been put into a detention center, obviously they've done something to get themselves in big trouble. And so that's why they're in a youth detention center. And my aim with that program has been to keep the young people from not making the same mistake again. So
mm,
their ages 14 to 18. It's a first time offense usually.
mm,
And to catch them and teach them to, first of all, recognize what's going on inside of them
mm,
so that they understand their own nervous system, primarily to keep them out of trouble, so that they can move on with their lives,
mm,
because it's a dysregulated nervous system that's being misunderstood outside of
mm,
them, that is often leading to behaviors that are going to harm themselves and harm others.
mm,
So I developed a curriculum that was used in a detention center in North Carolina, and I was working all virtually with the students. And there's a teacher in the classroom. So they're in these detention centers for about 6 months. And these detention centers are also associated with, more serious jails. So I wasn't even aware of how often they were being intermixed. So
mm,
I didn't even get to see their faces, but I understood that I was having an impact through talking with the teachers. And at the end of each session, they would turn on their mics and all say, "We love you, Miss Trank," or "Thanks, Miss Trank." But what I was doing was scaffolding information from the very basic, like, okay, what is awareness? What does it mean to be aware of yourself? And we would start there.
mm,
And in this setting, I did a practice with them every time. So I only did 15-minute sessions. We kept it short. Every week I was with them for
Mm,
15 minutes. And every week we did some sort of grounding, breathing, heart math, or polyvagal safety practice, but there was also a different theme. And I changed the themes based on what was going on at that time of the year. So near Thanksgiving, I did gratitude. Near Valentine's Day, I
mm,
did forgiveness, self love, compassion. In the winter, when they were getting ready to take their tests, I did test anxiety in preparation for the test. So I really took these emotional regulation tools and made it very thematic to whatever was going on at the time of the year. And we pre tested
mm,
the youth. We didn't have enough biofeedback devices to use for all the youth. They had 5 in the
mm,
facility. So the youth were trained in it and could use it on their own just for like, free time. But it couldn't be part of the
mm,
curriculum because we didn't have the money to buy enough of them for them.
mm,
But
mm,
so this was a pilot program I did, and we haven't analyzed the
mm,
success. We were hoping to see from a pre-test and a post-test less feelings of anger, maybe some more self-esteem,
mm,
more ability to emotionally regulate, and that's still to be decided whether it was successful or not.
mm,
And then I was also using it with a YMCA, and the YMCA's do a lot of after-school programs here in our public
mm,
schools, as well as summer programs. And so it's easier to get these programs into a curriculum that's an after school program or summer program than it is the regular curriculum. And I don't
mm,
know how it is in England, but in our country, we have so many mandates and tests they have to prepare for that the teachers feel very constrained to
mm,
introduce other types of programs into their day because they don't feel like they have enough time to get these kids
mm.
ready for the testing. Now, don't get me started on that because I don't agree with that. But it is the way it
Let's not
is.
go there. That's
Exactly.
another
Let's not go
time.
there. But the point is, the after school programs have a lot more flexibility in curriculum. And so
Mm,
I'm working on trying to do more curricular things, but in the meantime, I've been coaching their guidance people and teachers and working with them, and then working with individual students. So let's say a student is having some trouble. The guidance counselor, the student, and I virtually will get online together and we'll work through some practices that I'm trained in
mm,
and they're applying for a grant right now to try to get me more hours to be able to do this. They're really excited about the
mm.
possibilities. So, in terms of getting it into the general education, it's very difficult in our country, once again,
Yeah,
because of what I
yeah.
mentioned, but also there's, a lot of international kind of like character counts, kind of nice little neat pretty programs that that a school system can adopt and say, oh, we're doing social emotional learning.
Mm,
Now
mm,
whether the teachers are buying into it or believing it, or whether it's just like,
mm,
let's all do high fives, they're usually simpler. They're not usually really getting in depth. They tend to
mm,
be, let's do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, that kind of stuff. Very, very simple tools. And what we're hearing from a lot of the teachers who then delve more deeply into the kind of work that I'm doing is those tools are just scratching the surface. And oftentimes the
yeah.
teachers are not buying into them anyway. They're not always necessarily
Mm,
scientifically validated. And if you don't have that kind of thing, and if you don't have the teacher buy-in, then it is just kind of like rubber stamping, okay, I'm doing my
yeah,
SELs. And,
yeah.
but I still want to get rid of the bad apple out of my classroom.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say it's similar in that there's the greatest focus is still on the academic, on the curriculum. If children are struggling, or they are obviously going through a difficult time that the school is aware of, then you may see some sort of intervention, but it's not part of, you know, the everyday. And the recognition of how important it is to be, you know, emotionally self, you know, regulated, and how it impacts the ability to learn is still not widely understood. So, you know, very much the same. Yeah, I think we're pioneers in that respect as well. And who I wonder once, because I am hopeful and always optimistic about this, that, you know, times will change. I think they are slowly, very slowly starting to change, because we have just lived through a pandemic. Finally people realize, you know, how feeling emotionally stable is important. That if you give children and staff tools to feel better, and they do become aware of how they feel, and they start doing some reflecting, that they may realize that the system, the schooling system, the education system as it is now, actually doesn't meet their needs. Yeah,
No.
there's a conflict in what I need, what I, you know, what feels good for me, where I can succeed, where I can thrive. There's a disconnect between, you know, what children and teachers are being asked to do and deliver and accomplish in schools, and what actually is needed for everyone's happiness. So I am a bit of a feeling of optimistic, even that, you know, through this process, eyes and minds will open to other and bigger changes, even for the
Well, and
education
I'm
system
optimistic
here.
as well. One of the fun things I got to do this year was interview teachers, principals, and behavioral specialists that have implemented some of these practices, and how it has changed the atmosphere either of the classroom or even a whole school. And the stories are amazing. And I'll just give you a few examples. I
Mm.
have a ninth grade teacher that I interviewed who's up in Canada, and she's so excited about it. She's actually doing a dissertation on it now. So
Mm.
she's still teaching in the classroom. She's been teaching for 30 years, and she's now been given permission to teach 5 sections of a positive psychology class for ninth graders. And you know, the school is making room for this class, and
Mm.
teachers who are close by her classroom walk by her classroom and they say, "What have you done? Hypnotize these kids?" So, I mean, the kids are happy, they're working, they're
Mm.
productive,
Mm.
and you know, if if there's a substitute there and she's out, the kids will tell the substitute, "We can't get started until we do our heart focused breathing or our quick coherence or something like that." So they'll remind the
Mm.
substitutes that this
Mm.
is how we get ourselves together in order to be productive for the classroom. And then I have like a behavioral specialist, and that's the equivalent of a guidance counselor. That's what we're kind of calling them these days in certain school districts. And he he's called in when a child is misbehaving. So, you know, normally they remove the child out of the classroom and he goes and works with them. And he works with them a lot on playing games and things that involve heart coherence. But one time, you know, he asked the teacher, he said, rather than pulling this kid out, because the
Mm.
kid didn't want to be pulled out, could I teach the whole class? Could I teach the whole class this tool so that this one child doesn't feel like they need to be pulled out in order to learn this skill?
Mm.
And so he came into the classroom, he taught one of the practices to all the students, and this young person now didn't feel like they had been, you know, targeted as you
Mm.
only do this if you're a behavioral problem. No, this is something all of us need to do. And when all of us do it, even if 2/3 of the class get it, the other third are going to be pulled along. Their hearts are going to be synchronized by the coherence level of the classroom. So we can create a coherent field and
Yeah.
shift the energy of those students that are struggling more by getting more kids involved. So these are just a couple of the examples.
Yeah.
I have a principal from Australia that I interviewed. She uses it before she talks with any parent. because she wants to regulate herself before a parent who's probably upset about something that happened to their child is talking. And she constantly reminds herself, where am I? Where am I? Am I triggered?
Mm.
Am I, emotionally regulated so that I can be really present for this parent? So there's lots of examples like that.
Oh, I love this. And I think it's the perfect opportunity to get ourselves and regulated and balance our heart. Is that what you'd call it?
Sure.
Balance, harmonize,
It's
harmonize,
it's
heart
either
coherence,
synchronized or getting
synchronize.
into heart brain coherence.
Yes,
Okay,
let's.
so I
Mhm.
will lead you through one of our simpler practices, but it's the baseline practice for every practice. So we always start similarly, and I've added a few things from my yoga trainings and things like that that
Mhm.
they don't do. So the first thing I always ask an adult or student to do is shift around in their chair wherever they're
Yeah.
sitting and just, find yourself in a more upright position. And even for a moment, orient yourself by looking at your feet, possibly feel them on the ground. And then you could look at your hands maybe for a moment, noticing your hands. And the other thing you could do to orient yourself to where you are is find something on the wall. It could be a poster, a clock, or something. You could look at that for a moment. So we're really trying to get present to where we are right now in this location in our space, in our space. Now, since I would be teaching this to kids in classrooms and things like that, I don't usually suggest they close their eyes, but if you're
Mm.
practicing at your home or somewhere else and feel like you want to close your eyes, you could. And since you and I are at our homes, if you want to close your eyes, you could close your eyes. We're going to
I
be,
invite children to lower their gaze if they're not comfortable closing
yes,
their eyes. That's good as
yes,
well. Yeah.
yes, yes. So let's just go ahead and slow our breathing down. So it's a comfortable pace for you, which might be 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out, could be 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. The average pace that a lot of their scientific research has been on is 5 seconds for the inhale and 5 seconds for the exhale. But this may not be comfortable for everyone. So it's just a slower than normal breath pace, and it's an equal breath pace. So, in other words, don't pause at the top or the bottom of the breath. So, here's a critical step. We're going to direct that breath to our chest or heart center. For me, I like placing my hands there for the tactile feeling of knowing where I'm directing my breath, but it might not be comfortable for everyone. So now I'm breathing slowly in and out into the chest or heart. And what we're doing now is we are activating those 40,000 neurons in the heart. So the next step would be to activate some sort of feeling of care, appreciation, gratitude for anybody or anything. The easiest thing you can do it for. It could be a pet, it could be a favorite person, it could be a place, it could be a memory, it could even be an object or something you're proud of. It could be something as simple as the sunshine. So we're breathing slowly and steadily into our chest area. And we now have activated a thought and a feeling about something or someone that warms our heart. And this can be done in under 2 minutes. It can be done for a longer period of time. So what we've just done is heart focused breathing and a technique called quick coherence. So let's say you know you're about to go in and have a difficult meeting with somebody. If you're an educator, you would do this for 2 minutes prior to the meeting, and you might need to do it after the meeting to re-regulate yourself. If you're students and the energy of the classroom is too loud or rowdy or not necessarily appropriate for whatever the teacher has planned, you could get everybody just either calm down or even just ready to learn. Because what we've done is we've sent signals up, which the signals go through the vagus nerve up to our higher thinking brain, the cortical functioning part of the brain, rather than the emotional part of the brain, which is our reaction brain, which is also our memory part of the brain, which has us behaving always in the same way. So this actually goes to a different part of the brain and communicates. It also produces hormones that are known as happy hormones, oxytocin and DHEA. So those are the two hormones that are produced, and this has all been scientifically studied, and it turns off the production of cortisol, which is the hormone that's associated with stress that can build in our system. And they've tested blood pressure for people who have blood pressure issues. It lowers your blood pressure. And the picture, if you had a biofeedback monitor, would be like this beautiful, smooth, wave-like looking picture of your heart rhythms. So all that in how many minutes did we spend? A couple of minutes?
Yeah, I feel like I'm on a little cloud now, little wave. No, it's very powerful. This is I use breathing techniques, and it reminds me of like a gratitude type of gratitude meditation. I guess it's all very similar. Thank you for this. It's beautiful. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Right. I wonder, I think we're nearing the end of our conversation. I'm just going to quote something from your website, and would like just your little comment before we finish. I highlighted in my notes that you put your heart, mind, and soul into your work. What does that mean? What would you tell us about
Well,
that? What is
I'm passionate about helping people be as healthy and as vibrant as possible. I've always been passionate about children,
Mm,
but I'm also very passionate about the educators because they're first line workers. And I don't
mm,
think people recognized before the pandemic that they were. But
mm,
post pandemic, I think there's more of a recognition that they're on the first line. And we are the biggest factor, particularly with the number of hours children spend in the classroom in the mental, emotional, and physical health of the
mm,
children. So, it's a huge responsibility, but it can be a wonderful responsibility if you're able to keep yourself healthy emotionally,
mm.
physically. So this is just a passion of mine, and I'm thankful that I burned out. I'm thankful that I got sick. I'm thankful for all these struggles I went through because I really speak authentically from my own journey, and I'm available to help really, schools, systems. I want to do assemblies, and things like that,
Mm,
virtual
mm.
assemblies where I can do just 15-minute little sessions with, children from all schools. I'm willing to do it. So
I completely see that. Like, imagine, every classroom would spend literally 5 minutes at the beginning of each lesson, just with a simple breathing and coherence exercise. I think they would see incredible results and increased levels of happiness. Full stop. Yeah,
and
I'm
increased
equally,
levels
yeah.
of productivity
Oh,
too,
absolutely.
because
That's a
the teachers,
byproduct. Yeah,
it's all
yeah,
about productivity, and
yeah.
we are so much more productive when we're happy and healthy. It,
Absolutely.
it all ties in together. We sleep better. There's so many positive effects,
Mm,
and really, those 5 minutes that are spent with like trying to settle the kids down and all that, chaotic energy and everybody getting
Mm,
frustrated and all that.
mm,
If everybody came in and just did that at the beginning of classroom, like they
yeah.
did in my friend and teacher's classroom,
Mm,
the other teachers would think you're hypnotizing your students. So,
I love that. I just recently shared this quote by my favorite. Well, he's I'm talking about A.S. Neil, who's the founder of the first freedom school in the UK. It's been in existence for over 100 years.
wow.
Yeah, and so he's got a very or he's not with us anymore, but I just shared this quote by him recently, which says that um, the intellect will take care of itself if emotions are basically looked after. That we put so much emphasis on in the intellect, the mind, but we're only going to be truly happy when our emotions, are balanced and in harmony. So yeah, maybe we could end on that note. Is there any final
Absolutely.
words you'd like to share with us?
No, I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope
Mm.
you and I get to work together. And
Oh, that would be amazing.
so
Yes.
I'm very grateful for you doing this and for offering me the
Mm,
opportunity to share my message because it is a hopeful message.
yeah. No, the pleasure is mine. Thank you so much for making the time, Andrea. It's been wonderful. And yes, let's just, put the wishes out into the universe that we can do something together. Okay. Thank you so
Okay,
much. Have a
you're so
wonderful rest
welcome.
of the
And
day.
we always
Okay.
we always send heart.
Yay.
Send heart.
Always, always. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Right.